I have played more than 600 hours of Blade and Sorcery, most of that time with lightsabers, and in that time I've thought of some tips to give you guys to improve your lightsaber dueling. Tip number 1 is to manage your distance. This is probably the most important thing when it comes to defense. You need to be managing how much distance is between you and your opponent. You see, you need to think of their reach as the extension of their arm plus the distance of their saber. If you can think of that like a bubble around them, and you can sit right on the edge of that, then they won't be able to hit you, they can't reach. But you need to stay close enough that you can still go for a counter-strike when the opportunity presents itself. What you can see I'm doing here is just letting the enemy attack while staying out of his reach. Then when I see an opportunity, I go for it, and go back into his range. This is something that can be used both with lightsabers and with swords, and it's probably the most important thing when it comes to learning this type of game. Tip number 2 is to keep your guard up. What you can see I'm about to do here is I'm holding my saber down, and you see how much I have to swing to either go for an attack or a defense. Instead, keep your guard up. If you keep it up like this, you only have to make small movements and adjustments to block strikes, and similarly, you can go for quicker strikes. Keep in mind also that Blade and Sorcery has weight to its items. If you try and swing your hand in the real world too fast, then the blade will glitch out. So you want to be making as small strikes as possible. So if you keep your blade up, you don't have to move as much, which helps the game engine and your fighting style overall. Tip number 3 is to counterattack. What I mean by this is that the enemy is most vulnerable when they're swinging. When they swing, they are opening up their whole body and their arm. So, when they swing, either block it or dodge it, and then is your best moment to strike. You can see that I'm doing that here. I block, and then I strike. I dodge, and then I strike. It's the best way to get easy kills on vulnerable enemies. My next tip is to sometimes dodge forward. If you do this right, you can get behind an enemy while they're still swinging for you in your original position. In these clips I'm also adding some extra flair by doing a flip or a jump over them, but really any way of getting behind them will do. Once behind them you can go for a blunt force strike, or just a straight swipe. Because their saber is in front of them and you're behind them, you basically have full reign to hit them wherever you see fit. My next tip is to use your environment. The environment has so many objects that can be thrown, including bodies, including pots and barrels and anything you can throw. And also, you can have things to climb on, things to flip off. Use your environment because your enemies will not. All they have is their sabers and sometimes the force, but you have the advantage of being able to use the environment against them. My next tip is, in a bind, go for the hand. It is the most vulnerable spot. Remember earlier I talked about distance. Things that are closer to you are the most vulnerable, and their hand is the closest to you. When they swing, their hand is immediately vulnerable. So, hit it. If you do it correctly, their hand will fall off, they'll be disarmed, and you can go for the kill very easily. Now yeah, this won't feel as cinematic or cool, but it will be very, very effective almost every time. Another thing you can do is you can lock blades and just slide down. It's the reason that crossguards exist in normal sword fighting, but just slide down and their wrist can just easily be lobbed off. My last tip is to keep moving, especially when there are many targets. When there are lots of targets, the best thing to do is to switch between them rapidly. If you can do this, you can often get a cheap shot on one of them, leaving less enemies to deal with. If there is a large group, you want to be doing as many attacks as possible. Don't wait to defend, there are too many. Go at them full force and switch targets very regularly. And doing this in conjunction with all of the other tips, keeping your distance, using the environment, you can keep them completely unassuming. Go as fast as you can, and they won't be able to do anything to stop you.